They were never meant to be found. Locked in sealed vaults, erased from military archives, and buried beneath layers of concrete, these 5 World War II secrets were so disturbing that entire governments worked together to hide them. From soldiers who vanished without a trace, to experiments that defy science and time, each story challenges what we think we know about the war. These aren't just forgotten files, they're warnings. And now, for the first time, they're being uncovered. Welcome to Unsolved Archives, where we delve into the hidden, the mysterious, and the unanswered. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight could be the key to unlocking the truth. Operation Ashen Wind. In the dying months of 1944, the Black Forest of southwest Germany stood as a bleak frontier, cold, impenetrable, and thick with secrets. Among the Allied intelligence briefings passed around in cold bunkers and smoky war rooms, one German position kept raising eyebrows, a series of repeated radio signals, rhythmic and unintelligible, pulsing from deep within the forest near Baden-Württemberg. It was dismissed by most commanders as residual static or equipment errors, until the 112th Forward Recon Company vanished. The 112th was a specialized U.S. battalion trained for hostile terrain and nighttime infiltration. Veterans from the Italian front, these were not green boys. They were hardened, methodical, and known for getting results. On November 16, the unit, comprising 97 men and led by Captain Ernest Raleigh, was tasked with scouting the area surrounding the source of the signal. The mission was classified under the code name Operation Ashen Wind. They radioed in at 0430 hours after crossing the perimeter. It would be the last anyone ever heard from them. 3 days later, when no updates came through and all attempts at contact failed, a second unit, the 67th Rescue and Signal Response, was deployed to trace their path. They found no battle debris, no signs of ambush, and no bodies. What they did find was worse. At the edge of a shallow clearing, nestled between dead pines, lay the abandoned encampment of the 112th. Rucksacks were still zipped shut. Weapons were laid down beside bedrolls. Coffee cups were half-filled and cold. One campfire remained smoldering, with logs arranged but never lit. No signs of struggle. It was as if 97 trained soldiers had stood up in unison and walked silently into the forest, never to return. But the most chilling discovery came later that afternoon. Etched deep into the bark of a gnarled oak tree near the northern treeline were 4 crude words: "The wind was wrong." A hush fell over the 67th as the message was read aloud. Then, as if the forest itself were reacting, a sudden gust swept through the clearing, loud, unnatural, and circular. A private from the 67th described it in a later, now declassified psychological report. "It didn't move through us. It spun around us, like it was choosing." That same private was committed to a mental hospital weeks later for self-inflicted injuries he said were to stop the voices in the bark. Higher command quickly took over. The mission was shut down. A 3-kilometer perimeter was established and marked as a minefield to keep civilians and other Allied units out. German prisoners in the area were interrogated, but none admitted to knowing anything, at least, not directly. One SS radio technician, however, said something that caught the attention of an MI6 analyst. "They told us never to triangulate signals from the forest. That the forest hears when you listen too long." All logs, radio reports, and findings were sealed. The 112th was officially listed as lost in combat, and families received boilerplate condolences and falsified reports of a German ambush. The truth never made it past a handful of war historians and intelligence officials, many of whom later died under odd circumstances: car crashes, house fires, heart attacks in their 40s. In 1967, a group of hikers exploring restricted sections of the Black Forest reported finding rusted dog tags and a collapsed tent buried beneath moss and earth. When one of them turned in the find to a local police station, he was later visited by 2 men posing as German military police. The man's widow later testified in an obscure Bavarian courtroom that her husband was found drowned in a stream weeks later, despite being an experienced swimmer and located miles from any water source. The recovered dog tags were never seen again. In 1993, a declassified CIA memorandum surfaced briefly online before being removed within hours. It referenced a satellite sweep that had picked up a structural anomaly below the forest canopy, an equilateral circular depression 300 meters in diameter, with trees bent outward from the center. The memo ended with a hand-scrawled post-it note, "No digging. Let sleeping ghosts lie." Some theorists claim it was a natural sinkhole. Others believe it was a failed Nazi experiment using infrasound or chemical warfare gone rogue. But among locals, especially the older ones who lived through the war, there's another belief, spoken only in whispers, that something ancient and buried in the forest was awakened by the war, by the noise and pain and death. That the 112th walked into something not meant to be found, something that didn't kill them, but changed them. To this day, the Black Forest contains areas off-limits even to modern German military personnel. Satellite maps show gray blurs and artificial trees rendered where the anomaly once lay. And in the rare years when the fog creeps unusually thick through those woods, some say you can still hear boots crunching leaves in a perfect marching rhythm. Then nothing. Not even the wind. The Kestrel Vault. In the final days of April 1945, with Soviet forces bearing down on Berlin and Hitler retreating further into the Führerbunker, a secondary unit of Red Army intelligence operatives was quietly deployed to Prague under strict, silent orders. Their objective wasn't a military stronghold or weapons cache. It was a location beneath Prague Castle, pinpointed by decrypted German transmissions repeatedly referencing something called Kestrel. Prague, untouched compared to other cities, had long been a center of Nazi occult interest. The SS, particularly through Heinrich Himmler's Ahnenerbe, had designated the city a spiritual nexus, perfect for energy anchoring. What that meant was unclear, even to seasoned analysts. The intercepted messages from the castle were erratic, pulsing with urgency, all directed toward a singular bunker beneath the old royal structure. The vault had been built into a centuries-old crypt, reinforced by steel and sealed with biometric locks, though biometric technology, officially, didn't exist yet. When Soviet troops finally breached it, what they found inside changed the course of the mission and erased the existence of those who witnessed it. The first chamber contained dozens of rusted iron cages, each one the size of a freight elevator, each holding what looked like dissected human remains. But these were no ordinary bodies. Some had elongated limbs fused with metal. Others bore surgical openings in their skulls, their brains exposed and crusted with resin-like coatings. A few had no recognizable features at all, as if something had been reconstructed from memory and failed halfway. None were fresh. All had identification tags, except for one. In the far chamber, behind a steel door warped from the inside, lay a single clean room. It was empty, save for a large operating table, 2 chairs, and a wall-to-wall schematic showing the nervous system of something with a triple spinal column. Red lines darted between human silhouettes and the 3-spined figure. There was no accompanying text, just glyphs that resembled a blend of Norse runes and Sanskrit, hand-drawn in black ash. One Soviet officer, a linguist named Mikhail Chekhov, attempted to photograph the wall but reportedly collapsed moments later with a seizure. His mouth was filled with blood, and he spoke a single phrase before dying: "It doesn't want to be drawn." Chekhov's body was removed under heavy guard, and his death was written off as acute stress syndrome. The photos were never recovered. A second team arrived 3 hours later, this one dressed in civilian garb and speaking fluent German. Witness accounts from surviving Soviet troops described their equipment as more advanced than anything we had, even now. These new personnel gave no names, carried no ranks, and immediately began a full erasure protocol. Documents were burned. Files were magnetically wiped. The walls of the vault were coated in a quick-drying resin that hardened like cement. When the team left, they sealed the tunnels behind them with explosive charges. The entire operation was struck from the Soviet record, save for one cryptic line in a defunct KGB filing cabinet: Kestrel grounded. Assets neutralized. Prague is not to be disturbed again. The mystery might have ended there, but in 1971, during renovations to Prague Castle, a contractor accidentally drilled into a hollow space beneath the West Wing. What he saw made him flee the site immediately and never return. When authorities arrived, they found the drill shattered, the opening sealed from within by a smooth obsidian-like surface. It was warm to the touch. The Czech government placed the area under military protection overnight. Fast forward to 1999. An urban explorer known only as Vrana claimed online that he had gained access to a restricted tunnel beneath the castle using old maintenance maps. In a now-deleted blog post, he described narrow shafts filled with industrial wire and what he called choking silence. He reached a dead-end wall but swore he heard a sound, like breathing behind the stone. His final post read, "They made something in there. Or woke something. Either way, it's not alone anymore." Vrana was never seen again. His apartment was cleared within 24 hours, and friends reported strange men in suits asking for passwords, keys, even his dental records. Today, the Czech government maintains that the west vaults of Prague Castle are structurally unsound and closed for heritage preservation. No mention of Kestrel exists in German records, Allied briefings, or Soviet military history. It's as if the project was designed to vanish once completed. But whispers remain. Janitors and night workers sometimes report light flickers, low frequencies that make their teeth vibrate, or dreams where they're on a table surrounded by faceless surgeons. The official explanation is always electrical interference. Historians who've researched the Annener believe Kestrel may have been the Nazi culmination of both bioengineering and mythological resurrection, an attempt to manifest the Aryan ideal through something far beyond science. Not eugenics. Not super soldiers. But something inhuman in form, perfected in intention. Whatever was in that vault, it wasn't ready then. The real question is, was it ever shut down? The Murmansk Signal. In the frozen reaches of the Arctic Circle, above the jagged spine of Norway and far beyond the last Allied airfield, sits a stretch of tundra so inhospitable it was marked simply as Zone F on British intelligence maps. In February 1943, Zone F became the origin point of a mystery that would haunt signal operators and cryptologists from London to Washington, a broadcast that should not have existed, from a place that no human voice should have reached. It began with a blip, barely a whisper, picked up by a British coastal station in Lerwick. At first, they thought it was interference. But the pattern repeated exactly every 3.7 seconds, like a heartbeat through snow. The pulse didn't match any known Nazi frequencies. No Morse. No voice. Just pure tone, eerie, toneless, yet unmistakably intentional. Experts dubbed it Signal Icarus. Within days, multiple Allied listening stations confirmed reception, including Bletchley Park. The signal originated from near Murmansk, a Soviet port vital to Allied supply lines, yet barren and militarized. When MI6 relayed findings to Soviet High Command, they received a chilling reply: "We have no transmitters in that quadrant. That region is dead." Under growing pressure, the Soviets dispatched a 4-man recon unit via dogsled from Kandalaksha. Their goal: locate the source and neutralize potential German sabotage. Only one man returned. Sergeant Alexei Vostrikov staggered into a forward base outside Apatite 10 days later, frostbitten and barely conscious. What he muttered before collapsing was transcribed and classified by the NKVD. The others heard it. "It knew our names. They walked toward the light in the ice. He died that night. His body was burned. Standard protocol," they claimed. Within a week, Soviet High Command escalated the matter to full secrecy. A specialized retrieval team, codenamed Kolovrat, was dispatched with American observer Captain Elijah Cross embedded via the Lend-Lease agreement. Cross, a linguist and electronic warfare specialist, carried a journal, which was later recovered in Finland under extraordinary circumstances. That journal, now held in a private collection, details what the Kolovrat team found. According to Cross, they located a German weather station, abandoned and half-buried in ice. Inside, nothing was normal. Furniture was overturned, radio tubes smashed, but the generator was still running. The equipment had been altered, reconfigured to send something out, not receive. In the control room, 5 bodies were discovered seated in front of the transmitter, dressed in German Arctic uniforms. Their faces were frozen in terror. But there was something else. Each man's ears were missing. No signs of violence. No blood. Just perfectly smooth skin where the ears had been. Their eyes remained wide open, pupils fully dilated as if they died mid-hallucination. On the walls were chalk drawings, circular spirals, concentric patterns, and cryptic coordinates that pointed not to Earth, but seemingly to space. One phrase was etched repeatedly into the glass windows: "See Hort Unis Zoo. She is listening to us." Cross's journal mentions an inner sanctum, an anechoic chamber built from strange insulation materials, where a secondary device hummed faintly. Unlike anything in Allied or German tech, the machine had no visible controls. It simply pulsed and whispered. He described it not as static, but as layered whispering voices, overlapping, some in English, some in Russian, others in no known language. When Cross stepped closer, he claimed the voices addressed him by name and began recounting personal memories he had never shared with anyone, about his childhood, his time at university, even a miscarriage his wife had suffered in 1941. He collapsed moments later. The journal cuts off there. What happened next is pieced together only from scattered memos, mostly redacted. The Kolovrat team was declared missing in action. The site was destroyed via long-range artillery strike, allegedly to prevent enemy use. But internal Soviet communications indicate something else, a fear not of the Nazis, but of attracting more attention from the origin point of the signal. In the decades since, rumors of Signal Icarus have persisted. Ham radio operators in Iceland and Canada have claimed to hear pulses on stormy nights, always at 3.7-second intervals. An American submarine in 1965 reported a phantom ping in the Barents Sea, matching the original waveform. NASA, in the 1980s, even acknowledged receiving anomalous frequency returns during polar satellite passes, returns they labeled as geothermal reflections, though internal scientists noted the patterns mimicked language. In 2011, a Russian oil crew drilling off the Kola Peninsula uncovered a metallic artifact 12 meters below the seabed. Their rig lost power, and 3 men disappeared during recovery. The project was shut down. The artifact was never seen again. Skeptics say it was nothing but wartime confusion, a trick of the cold. But cryptologists who study anomalous wartime transmissions believe otherwise. They point to one detail buried in a now declassified British file, a post-war memo from Bletchley Park cryptographer June Ellery, who analyzed the pulse in 1944. She wrote, "If it's a code, we cannot crack it. If it's a message, it's not meant for us. But it is meant to be heard." To this day, if you travel to the remote ice plains east of Murmansk and bring the right frequency scanner, some say you can still catch the tail end of the signal. Just don't listen too long. The Amber Train. In the final weeks of the Third Reich, as Allied bombs flattened cities and the Soviets closed in from the east, the Nazis began scrambling to hide their stolen treasures. Gold bars, Renaissance paintings, crates of diamonds, entire trains were packed with Europe's cultural wealth. Most were captured or destroyed. But one train, known only by its code name Cobra 12, vanished without a trace. It left the Polish city of Krakow on the night of April 12, 1945, with an elite Waffen-SS escort and no public record of its destination. What little we know comes from intercepted German transmissions and the recovered journal of an SS officer, found decades later in the attic of a farmhouse near Zakopane. The journal references relic containment protocols, the third chamber, and a final cryptic order: do not let the light touch them. Cobra 12's manifest listed traditional valuables, amber artifacts, ancient reliquaries, and a crate marked simply, Die Flüsternden, the Whispering Ones. This crate was surrounded by several others that bore the black and silver insignia of the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi organization dedicated to occult research and mythological experimentation. All radio contact with the convoy ceased 3 hours after departure. At first, the Allies assumed the train had been bombed or captured. But when no wreckage appeared, and no trace of the SS guards was found, interest turned into paranoia. The Soviets launched an entire division into the Carpathian Mountains to search the tunnel systems between Poland and Slovakia, some dating back to medieval times. According to a now declassified GRU report, Soviet scouts found a sealed rail tunnel, hidden by rockfall and false timbers. Inside were recent tracks, but no train. They dynamited the entrance. Inside, they found scorched walls, warped steel rails, and black soot coating the ceiling. There was no sign of treasure. No corpses. But one of the scouts, Lieutenant Mikhail Grigorev, made a recording with a hand-cranked field mic. The audio, barely audible over the static, contains what experts later described as whispering, though in reverse. It was played once for an analyst in 1968. He committed suicide a week later. The tunnel was resealed. The Soviet report ends with a handwritten note: they took something they shouldn't have. It took them back. In the post-war years, Nazi gold hunters and treasure seekers became obsessed with Cobra 12. Locals in southern Poland tell of strangers who came with metal detectors, vanished, and were never reported missing. One man, Dieter Henschel, a former Luftwaffe radio technician, claimed to have worked on a prototype jamming system for the train. According to his sworn statement to German police in 1953, the train carried not only relics but also resonant devices designed to protect the cargo from being seen by the old ones in the soil. He was dismissed as delusional and institutionalized in Munich, where he died after plucking out both eyes. The legend might have remained fringe folklore if not for an accidental discovery during a Polish railway expansion in 1975. Construction workers near the Snieznik Mountains reported unusual magnetic readings. Drilling equipment failed. The ground itself seemed to hum. Geologists claimed it was underground thermal activity. But one anonymous engineer mailed a soil sample to a German university lab. It contained traces of a rare compound found only in fossilized amber deposits and uranium. The site was paved over within a month. More recently, in 2014, a Polish television crew using ground-penetrating radar captured the silhouette of what appeared to be train cars buried under 30 feet of sediment. Their footage was confiscated, and their website taken offline. However, a leaked frame showed something bizarre, what looked like carvings or symbols along the side of a train car. Linguists identified the marks as resembling pre-Christian Baltic script, associated with pagan burial rites and ritual binding. According to occult historians, the Nazis had long sought the fabled Amber Gate, a relic believed by Baltic shamans to connect the material world with something else, something older and far more dangerous. If Cobra 12 was transporting artifacts linked to that mythology, it would explain the silence, the secrecy, and the desperate attempt to hide the entire train. Some speculate the Nazis weren't just fleeing with treasure, they were trying to bury something they couldn't control. Others believe the train wasn't taken or buried, but entered a tunnel that led somewhere else. A rupture. A wrong turn through time, space, or worse. Local legends speak of nights when the mountain air changes, when you can hear the distant sound of wheels on steel, echoing through stone. Some swear the train still rides a loop in an underground system with no exit, its passengers whispering endlessly in languages long dead. Modern expeditions have been proposed, even funded, but always fail. Equipment malfunctions. GPS goes haywire. Batteries die within minutes. One researcher described the effect as electromagnetic denial, like the Earth itself rejecting us. The most convincing evidence may be the photograph smuggled out by a railway inspector in 1982. It shows the mouth of a sealed tunnel. On the stone above it, etched into granite, are the words, "Was blight, darf nicht erwachen. What remains must not awaken." The Solstice Man. In the chaotic twilight of Nazi Germany, as the Allies closed in and every department scrambled to destroy files, a single black dossier was handed off in Berlin to a British intelligence officer under strictest secrecy. It bore no insignia, no stamp, just the handwritten label, Sonnenschnitt. Sun cut. That file, now heavily redacted and locked in the deepest archives of MI6, contained a mystery so bizarre that it was eventually erased not just from wartime history, but from all official records of the era. It revolved around a man, one who shouldn't have existed. He was discovered by German border troops in early 1944, near the Norwegian town of Narvik. Dressed in strange, unfamiliar clothes, the man had no papers, no weapon, and was barefoot. He spoke fluent German with an accent no one could place, and according to the guards, he surrendered immediately, saying only, "You're late." Interrogated by the Gestapo, the man gave his name as Isaac Teller. He claimed to be an emissary, not from a nation, but from a future timeline, one where the outcome of the war had already been decided. His mission, he said, was to prevent a catastrophic event that would occur if certain Nazi scientists were allowed to complete a device codenamed Morgenlicht, morning light. At first, his claims were met with mockery. But his knowledge was disturbing. He accurately predicted the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich in Prague, even naming the Czech resistance members before the Germans had interrogated them. He described the layout of the Führer bunker, which hadn't even been built yet. He knew Hitler's medical file in detail, including a tooth that had not yet been removed. He knew Allied invasion plans for Normandy, including exact beach positions, months before D-Day. The Ahnenerbe immediately seized him. What followed was a series of closed-door experiments, psychological evaluations, and silent transfers. Teller was moved to Castle Wielsberg, Himmler's occult headquarters, where he was subjected to tests, some designed to extract information, others far darker in nature. Witness accounts, smuggled out by a reluctant SS doctor, describe forced dream state interrogations, ritual exposure to ancient symbols, and even attempts to reverse channel his memories using electromagnetic induction. Yet Teller never resisted. He simply waited. He kept repeating the same warning, "You're going to listen too late. And when you do, they'll already be awake." The doctor's final report included a troubling detail. Teller's blood showed unknown markers, proteins never before catalogued, and a cellular decay pattern inconsistent with his age. He looked 40. His cellular structure suggested over 90. What terrified the doctor most was Teller's eyes. They never adjusted to darkness. He could see in the black perfectly. Then, on June 21, 1944, the summer solstice, Teller vanished from a sealed observation cell inside Wielsberg. The guards were found unconscious. Surveillance equipment failed. In the middle of the room, the only trace left was a ring of melted iron and the faint odor of ozone. No forced entry. No tunneling. Just gone. The Germans were in a panic. The incident was immediately covered up. All surviving personnel were either transferred to the Eastern Front or executed under suspicion of espionage. The Sonnenschnitt file was moved to a deep bunker beneath Berlin, meant to be destroyed before the Allies arrived. But it never was. That dossier was recovered by the British in May 1945, during the chaos of Berlin's fall. Intelligence officers initially dismissed it as another Nazi fantasy. But then they noticed something odd. Teller's file included a full biometric sketch, a visual ID rendered with eerie detail. The sketch matched no known man in 1944. It matched a man who didn't exist yet. In 1963, during the Kennedy administration, that same face appeared again, this time in a security photo taken inside the United Nations building in New York. The man was never identified. In 1987, the same face appeared in the background of an image from Chernobyl, walking calmly near the reactor ruins hours before meltdown. Most recently, in 2001, he was captured on CCTV in Zurich during a blackout, staring into a camera that shouldn't have been powered. Isaac Teller, or whatever he truly was. Over time, the Sonnenschnitt file became a myth even within MI6, passed around as a ghost story by analysts who called him the Solstice Man. The idea of a traveler, someone not from another nation or ideology, but from a branch of time no longer accessible, was too much for any system to contain. It threatened everything: cause and effect, history, agency, God. In 2009, an anonymous whistleblower leaked fragments of a newer file, marked TS Delta 3. It referenced attempts to trace non-linear actors through global surveillance systems. The file was pulled offline in under an hour. But one quote remains preserved in screenshots shared across conspiracy forums. "He wasn't here to stop the war. He was here to stop what happens after we win it." What could that be? The file ends with a final note, handwritten and unsigned. "If we ever see him again, it will already be too late." This timeline is a burning photograph. He's just trying to keep our eyes closed before the flash. No one knows what happened to Isaac Teller. No one knows who, or what, he was trying to warn us about. But some say that every solstice, when the light stretches the day into something unnatural, his shadow appears again. Always watching. Waiting. Making sure we haven't lit the match that burns the rest of time. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?